also has ventures in the sports world, focus groups that are New Jersey general.
I think that's an interesting one. I think, look back at that, Donald Trump rode much like now, maybe. Like a lot of I'm starting slowly trying to compete in a dominant sports nation in the United States. And the idea was to create this bag operation. Younger owners that students what was out that department.
Money. I would have to go. Anyway, from the initial
Remember, I think, starting point that from his father, about $500,000 in his from the effects show itself and then all the sort of names with that. I mean, not another half. Then he got pushed into that. Nothing that required business. About that, if you invest out in the stock market, that's about it. Worth $16, $19 million today. I mean, just that you will be businesses. Always tried to put up with all along by that easy money. And also, what you're getting at are a lot of money. Something more than something more than a million. And some of that, a lot of that is not paid back. That he's been able to out of kind of and then also over 2 years acts and he has about his life habit of not promising higher lawyers. And it doesn't go his way. I'm there's more family whereas in contract, and at the end, all the that's on the dollar, and you're going to lose more what it is. Out of different ways, able to be the outcome of his own. The original enabling factor ultimately got not having.
in your book, multiple languages. yet he has managed personal bankruptcy. That not skill has he managed with that sort of
Well, it's certainly the skill of his bankruptcy lawyers in those cases. Well, the original bankruptcy team of doing well. Empire on borrowed money. Banks that even owe all the other that issue junk bonds, most and then it all came crashing down one time. At that point in time, bankruptcy, federal loan, money, money, airline. They didn't want those. Well, they thought that they could take some of those away, stop some of them, find buyers themselves, and do better than they would if they later bankruptcy and year record. That's really on with more eyes, whether it takes Donald Trump out of the picture and find some other way to go. There was a determination that emotional ability brought to the attention towards something. And other times it's kind of on the cusp of it, but he'll get out of some debt, get out of some taxes.
mentioned his time on the cementing section of his success stories with something called
Mysteries of modern American history. He had been famous in New York for not doing very well in business. Night show, traveling about ex-wife, girlfriend, about girlfriend, ex-wife, new, and actually showed up. And a comedy, all bankrupt. They created this has ever improved. It made Donald Trump where he goes. I'm just and that we have to incoherent, didn't make sense.
verge of bankruptcy and back. You can
Very difficult to look at someone and touch them. Also really hard to find growth in Donald Trump. Make the same sort of judgment calls over and over. All of those business problems, positive, difficult about his life. It's the same problems over and over again. Somebody else, oftentimes about his life, saying, proud to death, I'm Donald Trump. That's one of the things he and I think actually been out together. Hard to reconcile Donald Trump. Not Sounds very much like the way that's amazing.
already the Lady Melania set up their own theme park. Massive transfers, potential wages to transfer that as a decision of the way that is untraceable. How very easy that the
there's never been anything that it has viewpoints. Remember these things that have no value other than limited edition baseball. That's more of what it's supposed no way to tell whether something's larger or not. How much anybody actually on it. Different qualities. And there's no way to know whether they let no back check. Then this interesting currency pasture. More than $50,000 in cash, any chapter, file, exit. There's campaign contribution. How? Credit cards. There's no limits, no pumps, outlets.
the reporting from the over states of the portfolio. Actual concern there for foreign policy, just the perception.
I know most politicians it may be the same.
struck by kind of the election of that. There's so much stuff that is review on the business all we get is a making fire and they sort of like we see in the White House gonna get the Trump economy back, exports gonna come down, the economy is gonna keep booming. Getting richer and richer in real time. Where do you see this happening? A real political problem for the president and for his getting wealthier and wealthier while not doing it.
I mean, your question, great summation for where we are right now. What are the magic aspects of life, which even the question, and there's very different realities. Part of that was Eric Ruff before the 1980 Austin shows in television. Now, it took place it's very much in the mix with all stuff that you invented, that change. And what else? Here's something to see how that working eye to eye at people who should really show it. They're really sort of because why they would think of that person when it's in their interest. But that's part of from Chicago. Obviously, I'm thinking nothing true about it, and it doesn't match the gun. But he's all that. Why the numbers? Normally, that would eventually come back on. Carolina's northwest corner, Ashe County lays on a rolling mountain plateau, ranges from 2,500 to 3,000 feet above sea level. Isolated by rugged mountain terrain, Ashe County was described in the 19th and early 20th century as one of North Carolina's lost provinces. Bordered by Virginia, Georgia, Tennessee, and West, Ashe County is considered part of South Central Appalachia. Unlike its Appalachian neighbors to the north, Ashe County lacks the coal and mineral resources of other parts of Appalachia and Georgia. Truth be told, life has never been easy. Traditionally, families survive by living on small farms. The most important crop in this type of agriculture is maize, corn, and green beans. From everyday dinners to summer cannon marathons, green beans continue to face generations of mountains.
His royalties were incredibly important to Appalachian society, and there's a tremendous diversity of beans that we still continue to eat and they can have protein, they have a lot of fiber, they're yet very easy to roast.
I mean, you keep things out the garden, and those people within 100 plus stores per year. And we got it. What we can, we didn't go to the store a lot like this. Very, you know, I couldn't have been on every day. The summertime and candy.
For the last 2 centuries, the cultivation of green beans has been more than just a farming practice in Ashe County. It's been a matter of survival. Passed down through the family, knowledge of the family, growing, harvesting this essential crop has been a constant thread in establishing local Appalachian culture. During the mid-20th century, a dramatic shift occurred. Folks in Ashe County began growing beans on a commercial scale. Slowly at first, then on a massive scale, green beans soon becoming the largest and most important crop in the region, generating millions of dollars in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. What then was the spark that motivated local farmers to take the lead and start developing, distributing, and quadrupling green beans? The answer is complicated. Undoubtedly, success of farmers growing and selling green beans next door in Johnson County, Tennessee, which proclaimed itself the green bean capital of the world in the 1940s, played a significant factor. Travis Burton, former county executive director, feels that the experiences of certain Ashe County families evident to prove this off the mountain also contributed to believe that Ashe County had something the world needed.
So in Ashe County, green beans diet probably has been always in backyards, side houses, is really the way of life. It was about feeding family. But we always feed the family. We also have a little bit on the pocket. But have our family successfully. And with green beans, I think that possibly started in 1946 based on Chevrolet. The person got rolling. They would load that stuff up and drive all the way down to the park on Tom. Now at that point in time, Tom had the road. They would drive down the road the whole day out of Charlotte. Truck and wake up the next day and start selling. But when they sold these, realized probably when they went to the road down there, the park. Come back here, ask people for more green beans. More people start growing them, and then you start selling them. And I believe that really is the first. That's why area. And there's a lot of studies going on. Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. This is because of the 1940s, because we had finance. And no, and lots of and it wasn't a foreign crop. They were raising it harder, and then it really easily transitioned to a crop. So you start that's the thing, how you did it, how you there's the ground, all similar, almost right halfway to
was flood, worried about drought.
It was just like right before the year. We had the Banished lake, they pulled across, weather across, groundhog across, insects across, and it was just all moving blossom. And you learn, I learned to make your head strong.
There might not be anything tradition on bush things open. Bush things grow in compact bushes, 1 to 2 feet tall and don't need support. One more popular thing variety is grown in evergreen length. Old things, on the other hand, grow tall and need a support system, pole or a wire. If proper support, old things grow over 10 feet tall. One of the most expensive old things variety is 198.
After that, big cash. But in those early days, horses, they were all tractors, but also took a lot of animals. It was usually the first 5 I don't think that. The people who fix people primarily this is really important. First time actually to make that big favor. The most important part of the meeting wasn't necessarily planting, it wasn't selling. That's the kind of deal. For higher favor to control the margin. The problem was getting all those favors. So we had a lot of people that were pretty trusted. They had coaches and they planned these viewers oftentimes they got paid per hit. We have some great stories where truck drivers got 50 a head. We know one truck driver, he got 78 people back to the first one. He made lots of money that day just for holiday season. They took it back.
We had an old country store about a mile from town, and the kids would walk down there about every day. It was, you buy some groceries there, but it lost like the local place to close. And they had a place you could play horseshoes. Young folks did that a lot. So, they would say every now and then, phone them, so if anyone's interested, be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. So, we walk out and see them down there. And usually, it would be cars, like carpooling or a backhoe pickup truck. My husband, he grew up landing and he remembered that there was a bus. I call it the Green Bee Bus. But we didn't have that frequent. We just rode cars and trucks.
Right, big truck. Run up in there and they had hauling big fish. Like cattle back. They had a cattle back out there. 2 tons of road. And they let us know when they was coming by that morning. Mom would say, well, the things we're running for, we got to get ready. So we had to get ready and get on the big truck and ride it. Sometimes out the police was in a different place. And I still pick with my dad when I was young.
The one thing about riding a big truck is sing and sing all the time. And I done on the road.
when they grab those beads, put them in the hamper, and you really get a lot done. But hey, when they start, well, the hours we work, it was production work. So the more beads you're picking a day, the go and get this thing, when I pull them over the fire, so fast. Hard work, it was all hard work and fast work. Out things, tax breaking. Whole thing's not quite as fast because you're going to let them down. The boats broke at the top and they're being humped over. If you look at yours, all things, look on top of it, because it's been over all the time. Short in our boat. Really had. But most everybody got down on the knees to be. Come out there and put cakes on them on their pants up their knees. They're walking around with big things. That's the easiest way.
Oh, I really hate it. I had to fly on that. To drag me to the green field, and I tried to find any way. That basket never got full. Didn't matter how hard I did. It was like it was like a barrel when she tried to fill it. Here she was already working. I didn't even have a hat. Except for it. And the sun got really hot when I went in the morning. Pretty shady. It just got a little I would say no problem with it because I like to have fun more than I like to sit baby. I like to throw babies, I like to talk, I like to listen to everybody else's skills. And really my heart is what it is. So I got no awards for keeping.
It's a hard job. Being over back break. You get a little extra. Not much.
Sometimes you have a row of your own. Sometimes somebody started at the end of the row. You teach you mess. We see when you got your basket like this. Got that full. They had guys that would come by and pick them up, take them to the truck, and they would give you a little square piece of paper that like Post-it, and you could stick that in your pocket. You could stay. And forever, got one of those forever wishes for each one of those. And we picked them end of the day, and then you'd go turn your little square pieces of paper in and get your money. I think most I thought was probably around $20. An average day for me was more like 12 to 15. I wasn't a real good big picker. Some of those little old ladies, see them, they look like they weighed maybe 90 pounds, and they could pick things. They could pick twice as much as I did.
I like picking things. Food day is not really hard. And if the things were not, most of the things were nice days, they weren't wet, and the nice days it was fun. Especially when you had several people there. You know, a lot of people. Hey.
Selected a row and things, I mean, if the engines were 24 and most times they were, I could pick up push and lessons like that. So I always carried a second basket. When that one got full, I started picking in the other one. Then you had to yell for the players. It's always players, lugger, and as soon as the lugger showed up, he'd give you a ticket. They call it buggers, but we carried the big 1,000 wheel activity plate. Had to be 32,000 plate, Johnson Hall, then Harper, a lugger. We would take a score tag, put it, take a brand new basket up there and swap baskets like they played it. Then you take that basket back to where the truck was. Bring the water around and don't get I
water, everybody on the same temper, and nobody thought anything about it. While bean picking was hard work, it did have a social aspect that many people, especially the young ones, thoroughly enjoyed. Riding the beans, buying the soda, and getting them a rare chance to interact with their friends. Here's what we look like all over the world and
It was lunchtime. Everybody brought their lunch. We'd all sit down together and eat lunch. That'd be kind of a socializing time. A lot of times there's just a lot of young people there.
We were picking in one field and this big boy came over and I told my mama to get him one and from it. That my experience at the time. And then, as I said, it was very hard work and I didn't like it. But we also had riding on back and forth, you know, out of kids get together. And we had to socialize, you know, so there was a lot of fun.
besides being fun in a sense, it's got the same freedom. But many local kids with their first opportunity to earn cash and to how they want it.
I would save it till the end of the summer, and I'd buy me food clothes. I usually buy a couple outfits, maybe a pair of shoes, and of course I'd spend a little now and then on soft drinks, something like that.
I remember for in clubs for like $2.98, and they had blouses for dollars. And that was good. It was good.
Well, it was very important. I was going to save up some things, put on me a car when I got to where I could drive. I never did make enough big things to buy it, but it did.
I usually I would give her money. I would get my twinkle out. Here's your Robert catalog. And she would write a check and order it. The mailman could not there at our house. Hey, got a week. And get our twinkle.
Sally Christmas.
Like Christmas.
I mean, I could think, I mean, I did a whole lot of money back then. I opened up a savings account at the First National Bank and saved the money. And actually, my brother and I bought our first car from what we keep it to and what we saved, picking beans and milking cows. After the beans were picked, weighed, loaded on the trucks in the field, they were driven to a bean auction, usually the same day they were picked. Over the years, 3 different bean auctions or markets operated in Action. One in West Jefferson, on Radio Hill, later one in Smithville. Bean market was a premium. There you go. So, in the summertime, as those beans started to come in, as one informant of mine said, it was a rushing time at the bean market. They would be there. Usually they would start maybe around lunchtime, and it would be way up to midnight before they got done. Because as those beans were picked, as those beans were picked and those trucks were full, they would haul those to the market. Because you always wanted to get there as soon as possible. Those buyers had quotas, so you could get there with your beans first, while the demand was high. Generally, you could have been supplies. It was very regular often a chat to do. And did fascinating thing. A wonderful funny story on Saturday. Henry auctioneer trash people. He run wrestling. And on Saturdays, usually, growers would start harvesting product at the auction, or probably on a clock, I don't for sure, but probably on a clock, and then have an auction every hour. But Henry Banished over against Paul. There was like a 50 Henry. And finally, the wrestling become auction. And they couldn't wrestle. The whole market shut down. Waiting on Henry. Wrestling. Sometimes it's a long time. We finished up. Go back to auction.
Main markets in Haiti can be operated from early July, first frost, field beans, and pickles, usually in late September or early October. Operating 6 days a week, Ash markets only closed on Sunday. On a big day, 15 to 20,000 bushels of green beans, bought by buyers representing national chains like Wendy's, BSD, and Publix grocery stores. Other agents bought beans to canneries like Bush Brothers Beans in Tennessee, Ash County's own cannery, Sugar Creek Beans.
Yes, they
Markets far away in Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Alabama, Patty, Ohio, and also sent buyers these buyer agents often competed against each other to get the best beans at the cheapest price. The farmers never knew day to day exactly what price their beans would bring when they delivered their crops to auction.
Big market also. But again, all these and buyers that showed up and what their motives were and what next. We're going to have to see a much higher per bushel price on some of that freezer market or the fresh market versus just canning. And again, the sooner you got there, the demand was high, there's a good chance you're being sell something. And if it's 10 from 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we know we had auctions that late, buyers are just trying to finish up and get their quotas and get them moved out. They were good days or bad days. He could plug away, but $6 one day to the day. When supply without demand and the price of beans dropped, mail cars actually get dumped with beans. And they weren't in baskets. They were just pumped in mail cars and buffalo. And that was kind of what we considered our salvage. I think about what it would be like to see beans just pulled dumped to a rail car.
Whether Ash County green beans were hauled away by train or by truck, no getting around the fact that local bean markets, primary function, sell and deliver green beans all over the East Coast. This simple fact does not take away from the reality. Bean markets also important culture, frequently being important gathering spots for entire families all over the county.
It was a great time. People would gather and socialize. As you're waiting to be sold, especially when it was a great time for networking and community building. This year as well. The towns were booming because there was so much money moving in, people coming into the towns and trading, and there was again that movement of but the trees able to go to this part from the main. We would go there and they had a snack bar. You could get hot dogs and soft drinks and something. They had a big tree there. So we'd do that. We didn't worry about the people selling and got some food. We used to bring them.
A friend of mine's dad had some integrate that propane we fixed in that evening. Those things are back on. So we went up there, we get up there and we'd have things back. You know, break things, burn each other up. For all the benefits of those financial resources Green Bay markets brought to Ashley County over the years, it's important to note that they also, unknowingly, were gateways through which a terrible pest was introduced to local farmers in the early 1960s. Prior to the 60s, raising green beans had been fairly easy in Appalachia. There were very few natural pests. It's believed, however, that somewhere around 1960, the dreaded Japanese beetle hit the ride in this county on the bean basket and brought to the bean market to share with farmers who could deliver the beans. The introduction of these beetles absolutely devastated the Ashley County agriculture. Bang!
I was in one field out there. You can see above the top of the trees. See them on the lines. Growers at the top that go out, they come that fast.
No matter what you're growing, something always wants to eat. And about agricultural history in the United States, most of the bugs we've had to deal with aren't native. We brought them in. Right. And there's a period of time where product don't know how to on the city. That's what they made their way to Ashe County. And for a couple of years, they devastated early 60s. They don't actually sell. What they'll do is go along and chomp these. They're pretty big beetles. So you have a large population of them. They can defoliate acres of green beans. But eventually, my grandfather worked with a way to apply certain pesticides and trained on how to apply those products. Japanese people, they could liberate green bean patch overnight if these all leaves so much. So we had to do a bunch of spray and Japanese people really does. I mean, we used these old big sprayers had a fan in it. You loaded the 7 guns and it had a big long chute at the end of it. You could crank it and it would actually shoot the dust 20 feet. So I can remember walking through the roads cranking that thing, and by the time you got to the end, it was pretty big rough. If you look back, the ground was just green. Despite the initial devastation caused by the Japanese people, Ashe County farmers soon learned to deal with them by the mid-60s as their fields produced record numbers of green beans, which resulted in millions of new dollars flowing into the county over the next decade. They call it green gold. That was the term for beans for a while. It was you could make $1.50, up to $2 plus. Beans for $1. Hey, for beans, you can actually make a lot more money than some people have ever seen. When you think about some impact, you think about those dollars come in for beans themselves, but then the farmer has to buy supplies. The workers buy clothes, gas, trucks, all these ancillary needs pop up and are supported by that one entity. So anytime something is major, spiderwebs and stingers and bugs are a vital aspect of the vitality of our community. And in Appalachia, we've also been isolated. So part of the piece that I was really interested in is the resilience of Appalachia. That we have a way of figuring out how to take care of ourselves. And when we can ship out a product like beans, goes from New York all the way down to Florida, you bring dollars back in. Those are $2. And $2 in Appalachian mountains are worth more than any other day. Because then we can spread it back out to all of it. And they live they said, I don't want my kids to have to worry about buying their clothes and being picked. So they were able to do that. They didn't have to go out and work anymore. So we didn't have to wait. And thinking, and especially
After dying out in 1980, no one ever thought green bean industry would come back to age. As years and decades passed, it seemed to be a chapter of history that doesn't speak about. Then a local farmer got curious. With the help of an extension agent, Heritage Board's 191 pole bean seed that had been stored away for many years by an old bean grower. Don Smith started to investigate if Heritage green beans had a commercial use.
what got me interested in one of my best friends, Dwight Birch, and digging beans. We played an awful lot together. Talked about the stories, going beans, and kind of got my interest going in green beans, and I just thought I would do something that nobody's doing. The biggest challenge was finding somebody that actually knew how it used to be done. Nobody knew the difference between the poles, how far to go in the pole, because talking to several different growers, used to grow older guys, they remember how far the pole was, how to wire, how to string it, and all that. We came up with a new way. The learning process of their life. So I let them tell me really how they do it.
And anything that you do there is a learning curve. But every year we find a new hurdle to cross on the
First beans in the used were a Morton 191. Dwight always talked about how pretty a bean was and how vigorous it was. But you could see the difference. He also bought commercial planted, but the 191 seed was a lot bigger, finer, faster, a lot more bold. The pole bean is a much better bean than the normal green bean you get at the grocery store. It actually has a bean in it. It's a big thing. You look at the beans you're buying at the grocery store now, it's just all the beans been bred out of them. The pole bean has a big bean in it, has a lot more flavor, a lot better. And I believe having a revolution in what I call slow food. We went through a fast food phase, but now we're starting to appreciate how things have gotten to our table and the work. Also, how they actually, because an industrial green bean doesn't taste like one of these Ash County foods. And that's what we're trying to get to. It may take just a little bit more work on your end and your goal. Not only do you get to taste some better beans, actually don't get to taste history.
Vision. The guys, especially. Question, you think to get it checked out by a rope? What did? Well, some people, that's all just a fun Saturday night. Everyone, they're not that so itchy. Doing this is nice to have something that's fully prepared enemies view of their rather crimes against humanity. Video of what did the German public know about the Holocaust during World War II, more on that. As such, as the war was winding down and rising on the wall, many of the Nazis, especially within the SS, started to draft plans for their estates, and the nations in order to secure their livelihoods and their lives. Well, one of the top destinations recommended by Nazi holiday building was Argentina, but this all brings up the question: all the places in the world they could potentially go, why Argentina? Massively, why not? Because of basically a political regime held by colonels and presidents of the wrong regime that, much like every other nation in the world, including the US and Britain, is extremely eager. They did former Nazis in exchange for exploiting their military expertise. That's it. On the answer is not necessarily wrong to add their university, but the process of becoming a top destination for retired institutional mass murderers was long. Over decades of German relationships and secret deals, most of which covered only relatively likely relentless investigation by the journalist Goni. So let's dive into that now. Well, in this population, it's roughly 1.7 billion inhabitants, almost 8 billion. The primary drivers behind this demographic migration. But a sizable number of those migrants, about 100,000, were also Germans. Motherland itself all belonged to unity. All of us died here, the bulk of Germans, descendants of Germans, as well as imported by Catholic faith from Russia, various reasons. Related to South America, particularly for resettling Kansas, Otis, and Nebraska and states, as well as Buenos Aires, Entre Rios province of Argentina. By the 1920s, Argentina began to community rather well. German Argentines, English doctors, civil servants, farmers or professional soldiers. Established strong links with the sector and the whole country. The Argentine roads of German scientists. Contracts. Around the 1920s, the German presence in Argentina continued to grow people. Over the same period, community started. Mounted, both military and political by Adolf Hitler's power in early 1933, the third Reich partly the organizational communities in Argentina, religious, educational, labor, and social needs. Associations integrated together taken over by representative Nazi Party, or more precisely by the chapter, denominated Argent and in German official left-wing Catholics were partially driven off, as those satisfactory areas were encouraged. Germany upon coming of age, those Denmark or and why disease joined by homes as a regime bang at home, his late arrivals were intimidating. Propaganda efforts, just based on violence, propaganda campaigns, collecting funds, and community-specific character purposes, in reality, Reichsbank, current. Those propaganda objects as for also managed to revert the effective communications. Arabs on, under their own methods, which became a vehicle for open and grand events. On this one, we would point out to you that there are lots of the news today has gone off the rails, but this has always been the case as others began record of the news from publications and over being more objective and others being critically unabashed just propaganda tools for its technology. What's like on the site? Fact check other severe or actually are they here things that find you already think despite all their work the Argentine mass were never their official membership in 2,110 in 1936 and 5 after that date. It is down, and on the whole prefer not to associate themselves too closely with the king. Matters was improved in March 1938 the Anschluss or annexation of Austria, strongly next by one region. 1 year later came another blow, known as the Patagonia Affair. On this one, in March of 1939, President Roberto Rodriguez was aware of a dossier revealing the plan to annex Patagonia. The dossier was actually a fake, a hoax, unlike British intelligence with the likely cooperation of local communists and American journalists. What is uproar caused by the scandal contradicted with those who on foreign language negotiations, including the unscripted German Alpine Nazis placing even then on rebranding themselves as the Federation of German Liberals and implicit. Now let's return to President Roberto. At the outset of the World War, he gave himself to be pro-American, pro-Clinton politics story. His tenure, however, was marred by accusations and some, let's say, stability about it. For example, shortly after taking office, his government's bench left which instructed policy roles to this directive effect throughout the war, affecting plenty of thousands of Jewish families from escaping persecution that are in Nazi-occupied Europe, granted Bosnia. Likewise were too bothered to help, like, up their doors with banning taking Jews in. Everything. It's like a very well-known person in Germany at the time that the vast majority of Jews without problems had intelligence on thus go that actually not the plan rather than assets following made life so miserable. Instead, you said what the Nazi brass do by count on planning the post and where to go. For example, the United States, despite its give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning in freezing, been successful once had with outspoken immigration policies. The country, but at this point they had a hard limit of thousands of immigrants annually. This minded country with an awful lot of qualify on all of that. These requirements were so strict that focus weren't filled with what happened. Further, again, despite well-known of the atrocities against the Jews being war, the majority of the American public opposed relaxed immigration guidelines, boosting numbers to accommodate this Germany. And a rather curious nation, given at the time, according to research, that 91% of Americans lived in the that matter, well, important to the story of Canada. Context often lost on modern readers, fairly not. Populous, then Christian nations, but the Samaritans and Jews at the time were hated enemies. Samaritans, anyway, in the end, not in metaphorical with one Asians of what we can find in the story. What they're doing for is a story of foreign individuals, a Jew because the Jew was desperate. Neighbour thing quite literally was outdated as the most important commandment according to Jesus himself. The general public, not just best, but most of the world, mostly everybody. On this note, other countries more or less general stuff. Britain, by the way, at the time had 83 identical Christian, even going further steps to actively reduce the number of German Jews who were being allowed to immigrate to Palestine and find one of the places. Relatively large number of Jewish immigrants in compared to the country. That said, in 1938, Britain agreed to amend the law, taking 10,000 Jewish children, but made no special provision for taking any Jewish adults outside of the already established immigration procedures. Point being, while Argentina's stance with regards to taking in refugees was perhaps a bit more extreme, the rest of 11, quite literally almost every other nation that was on but likewise at the same time, effectively staying. No, even knowing what was going on. Germany. Although perhaps nice given that they, this collective high problem attitude with regards to accepting persecuted refugees from troubled nations is still very much all over. Despite, I don't know, the fact that we're humans, and regardless of ideology or stance on immigration, Most would otherwise agree that helping human trouble is nearly always the right thing to do. It was on to something. But going back to Argentina, forties, Nessus, Raven, Castillo, Arturo Rawson, and Pedro Pablo Ramirez never broke off friendly relations, like publicly. During this time, allied nations, the US, amongst them, likewise suspected Argentina and Germany had given a special relief. Further, in November of 19, Press Undersecretary of State Sumner Wells began voicing his German minorities might retain political influence in the case of Allied victory. All of this prompted section of the State Department's Division of American Republics to initiate an investigation of what they define as the condition of Germany. On this, Special Section report, July 1940, noted the strong economic position retained by Germans as in America and Ireland. Probable existence on the ground, and perhaps exaggerating and overloaded forthright Isaac Buenos Aires after the However, while the American Department of State was worried about German presence in Argentina, their counterparts in the British Foreign Office had a different view. In 1943, British diplomats held talks with Colonel President Juan Perón, in which he revealed industry. Apparently, the Foreign Office liked the idea throughout 1944 and 1945. Its officials came to the conclusion that once the Nazi threat was dealt with, thousands of German and Austrian labourers should be transplanted to Argentina. In their view, this counterbalancing message. At the same time, the US takes parents on an manufacturer handle. In this, handle was accused of preparing have been expropriated. Personal enmity with Goering, as well as another tiny Dell. In any event, around late 1940, General Water and Intelligence Asset stationed at the American Embassy in Buenos Aires started tracking down rumors concerning prominent Nazis in Argentina. Finally, in 5 or might have enabled him to prove a long-standing State Department. On this, surprisingly, build the Nazi and ADs originated from a radio transmitter located in London. So, yeah, and mystery reveals. It was all part of a closely 1x7 Delman, a maestro of Captain Delman, then on the focus radio. German soldiers, broadcast from late German, one of their models called officers and party officials swimming away from and they don't hope that 30 before harms in water. Wow. Selma was the chief of propaganda and psychological nation against tyranny. But in this hilarious multi-uplifting of the victory. And it's now time to bring to the stage 2 characters, mostly Argentine, best alternative, and news or criminals. First, as from the Army officer who became president for 1940, within the public hospital in Argentina politics, held a date from like Trent Ellis, a friend of the poor echelons of the party, the favour of the have-nots. It was, at his age, that he served the ways of politics thanks to his influence and popularity of his wife. In reality, one was a great supporter of Italian fascists and Nazis. Regimes he had come to admire while he had trained in Allied troops in 1939, and while serving as attaché in Berlin. Back in Buenos Aires, while affecting himself as a executive of class and consort friendship with classes, one of his chiefs was German bankers, employing chapel unity and moral society campaign. Back in March 1945, following pressure from the Allies, the Argentinian government, President Farrell, over their neutrality and contact. Hosted the office, government, however, also believe this, even to the intention, wanting pro-government. That's fashion. Suspended. Could withdraw it. Back to business, not a prolonged effort. First negotiate, president, and prevented the expulsion of foreign way of Buenos Aires, they housed eventually farms were long would even do a massacre in 1917 realms was to produce food was from Denmark. President events of September lamented the alliance for Robinson, had been Michigan, and from Ron while his son. Secretary, editors, in early 1946, they agreed one trio began as policy. Here, on the extent, vast, as was a good place, for a capture, a big name, one of Nazis not master station in Argentina, SS captains, beggars, contact, process, intelligence office, actors, Spain, freedom, faith, funds, confidence, Buenos Aires, until the wrong set of outline, Mexico, Kansas, possible, going to very Troy, matching messages, bid and armies, antidote, travel, and establish cities. What about that line of activity? According to CIA password, that is July 1990, Danish were already on the trail of this organization which enjoyed active support in the wrong part and conditions. On this Nazi Underground Railroad, all the Nazis first from there they were starting death. There is company quantity. Described by the CIA as an operation, however, it's financial high related. Something funny at once. Two officials outside Carlos Piero, Secretary Ricardo Fernandez Nera, eagerly our force very much so that the foreign minister requested however, even once Piero Fernandez were out of the escapees, Trump wants to follow them on the slide, the short personally information. The Swedish leg of this outline is probably unequal bonds on reverse. Third horseman, fast forward. Or at best, the third is arrested by the Swedish police for a month. Charges of forging passport, benefit of passport. These, what questioning, best make passports for two Norwegian nationals, aberration. Following the Berg's route, the 1940s, which detectives must be one Carlos Burnett and Robert Schultz, 106. Third, Jules Investor hiring recruit, preferably Argentine arm, fellow stated, Argentine government. According to local newspaper Express, Jules went alongside the podcast with the crew, former member of the SS Council, arguing with those who volunteered and make there is no evidence of Belgian elements. Surprise or absolute the CIA somehow rations on the broadcast in January 1918, in Falcon, invested character of this small and elegant stadium, Navy should somehow been in operations. Why the Falcon was not with a regularly registered crew, not the contrary, unknown passengers, sail on Brunette. That was the last stop before the issues. But all of this, on many and point blank, getting out the pitchforks. This against Argentina, we feel compelled to point out that many of the customers of the Scandinavian batlines in German jet plane, other such individuals, of more Nazi affairs was something touch every prominent nation in the world was trying to do. Curiously, based on payment which saw individuals. And indeed, after the defeat of Japan, US police was assumed at 31, which made the Nazis like amateurs, not just a full cover of what that's also not free. US other US line is very systematic. Japanese imperial capital, not British. I can't play their role. They're playing and seemingly ordering or very well aware of forces. In a nutshell, US wanted data and experts on GU's Soviets the other way about what and the imperial families take place in Japan to govern their little money. Going back to past nutshells, you were like politicians and, well, what he's doing. On that note, going back to Argentina, of all the engineers and scientists, there were some rather bad apples, such as SS Dr. Karl Barner, also known as the English Mentor, is the ranger and the cure of homosexuality, which of course is experiments on subjects forced to patient camp. During a surgery, Barner producing testosterone temporarily walk off neither and from dairy energy. Dairy also no work while Barnett may have the actual Mengele, President Mengele, that himself also managed to make quality. On this one, was but non-directed upward thousand millions but dealt with sterilization, gas chambers, opposite. As learned in gas chambers, Nikola also wanted to experimenting on the way. Doing similar work, they had all rather shit. Occasionally reportedly whiskey. As for how he managed to get lost off, sure it all run by his Japanese counterparts, one rather than he simply short. Was his captured Auschwitz on afterwards he first traveled around by German territories invading the Soviet forces while carrying with him a box medical records. During this time, he took primarily worked as a farmhand. There were kind of there. He knows why I do. Where they never lived the next 5 years, like also most of the other impulses. After an incident where he tried to perform an abortion on died in Paraguay in May 1960. Back down after the war was his child captured out of life. And there it is, Angela. Stricken her in Bradshaw, 45 years. Angela's name means time, but how it goes, death, much later there is. First, what the Messiah found Angela, an hour still. Journal entries indicating that a change of ideologies and all showed actions in the ultimately had a stroke. Died in 1969. Buried up the false name was scared to get a heart until 1992 with authorities on the physical and tax checks. Nangala, in any event, going back to the rat lines, Nangala studies the market. Now, following the arrest, the 40 rat line led to these rise of clarity of something. One of the most active state lines was Dave Francisco Franco. He was the leader of Tulsa. Washington, but he was undeniable lines and going to classify reports as public advance of criminals, law, elaborated, Franco's Spanish congregation, various monasteries according to the report, state lines, organized bodies identifying the Spanish and Nar. Further, if the Nazis on the run were arrested on the Franco-Spanish frontier, we set free constant phosphor, once in Spain, Dal, and then contraband to a priest congregation, one of Father Ernesto's father, daring, husbandman, if possible, get to the Argentine. All together, out on the help of 3 individuals working at the French embassy. 2 priests, one at Mars, and Deacon Francis Pietri. Issue ambassadors claim. Context, the French state will issue Francis collaborations, rough states set up by Germany following the French Republic. The second escape from convictions is entirely banned by journalism. The last alone in the country. Another priest identified as Padre Boost, Johnson. The author of the report, however, admits that we know nothing of the workings of the organization. One of the jobs provided close encounters. The local parties. The treaty in late 1945 1946 and early 1947 was a hotbed for rat-line runners, other than actually Spanish capital as early as April 1945 by the SD. SS. Even before Freud's initiative, Archie Heinrich Hitler and Walter Schellenberg had explored the island. Francoist Spain was called for that. Among the first officers to land are those foreign SS captains, German and Norwegian, which shows the Nazis failures in the welfare. They played this prescient thing. I thought it became one of the first to exact stage. Technical advice, Air Force, Right, what's the That's been dictated by Argentinian Cardinal Antonio Cagano at the end of Argentina. Human was suspended with business. Right. It's come to conduct talks with the physical commission of the can't provide legitimate refuge. As a result of Cagano's intervention, UCA began providing services also German attacks and immigration laws. Cagano was shy about tensions when keeping with French guard artists around quote, governments of non-aligned public literacy, French persons, physical attitude, beyond the law. Should they answer harshly and end. Quote, the opposite cardinal was clearly referred to collaborate the same the Nazi. Parallels carry on. Okay, Argentine diplomacy. In June 19, Montini met the Argentine ambassador from interest in immigration to Argentina. According to the aforementioned author, very ancient business. The extensive price of bonds in the Nazis and fascists during the what is undeniable? Rate passage, not accident, as the same time. Making it very impossible from the shelter, clothing, and fun journeys. The last leg of the journey.
Yeah, I looked at what you were got something to do with tomorrow. And, I worked for the Justice Department for several years, and somehow it doesn't exist. Only exists on TV and the old mom. I got him married. I'm poor and marry sort of woman. And they're just pretty pathetic. They were destroyed. Actually, they're destroyed. Living for life. I got it all done. And it was complete. Therefore, well, you feel now. Young guy didn't want to. His son, took over and he bailed out. Did his time. Didn't know what was wrong.
To avoid capture
film photographs of mechanical to your avatar. They're at the slave center, the slave here. And, yeah, plantation meat. Sit there, here like you, and with a female offspring, fired by their husband. Well, you know, do the same shit you do. It was legal back then. You can't own anything. It's illegal. Then again, you're a PhD. But, people don't believe it. It's asking. I was PhD, I'm very smart. They laugh so hard. Yeah.
Centuries went on photography, drew about Japanese world. But briefly, while one member of the
Yeah, you can't own anybody. Look at the cup.
Also goes for sure what's the wagons to reach the emperor. First also they
So, what did they do? After that, they created sharecropping. And then they had a shop at the company store where they got about 75 cents of chicken business on $1. It was not paying gas. That's being hard to get. Break everyone to pieces like this. Still working very well today. So I guess the two women inside your sharecroppers territory. I'm not sure what they're comparing this. So it can't be owned. Anybody who says it owns, null and void. Any fucking contract yet. You can't give up something right or perfect. To do is an act of insanity, and insanity going with anything like. But again, you're a PhD and you know that. But, you know, as you say, you're a PhD, you're very smart. The point is, you know, illegal. Own anybody in the United States. And it's illegal for anybody to give up the right. Does give up one's rights under the Constitution is an act of insanity. Therefore, any any contract was for
In the summer of 1866, war has broken out in Central Europe. The fate of the German-speaking lands hangs in the balance. Austria and its German allies facing Prussia, its German ally. And Italy, battlefields from Hanover to Bohemia to Banished. The victor might one day unite the German lands into a single empire. As the Napoleonic Wars came to an end in 1814 and 1815, the kings and diplomats of Europe reorganized the continent in the Congress of Vienna. One issue. Question, or what to do with the many different German states. Out of the post-war treaties came a new German confederation of independent states. European powers hoped that this confederation would bring stability and peace, but they did not want a single German nation state, which left the German question unresolved in the eyes of German nationalists. In particular, some in Prussia were not in favor of Austria's being rolled into confederation. The relative post-Napoleonic peace ended in 1848, when the German states, much like the rest of Europe, erupted in a revolution motivated by liberal nationalist ideas. But the short-lived Revolutionary National Assembly also failed to solve the question of a German imperial nation. It debated fiercely about whether Austria was Germany. Finally, they decided to exclude Austria and asked the Prussian king of emperor called the Small German Solution. King Wilhelm refused to become emperor because the imperial project had been offered by communists. The German princes then crushed the revolutionaries by force, and the confederation tensions after the 1848-49 revolution and the complicated structure of the confederation created potential for future conflict. But the immediate origins of the Austro-Prussian War of 1860. Lies in the two Schleswig wars with Denmark. The Danish king also ruled over two duchies in the Confederation and the Duchy of Schleswig, which was neither part of the Confederation nor of the Danish kingdom. Tensions surrounding the status of Schleswig and Holstein led to the First Schleswig War of 1848 to 1851 between Denmark and the Confederation. The Danes won the war, but in 1863, Russian Prime Minister Otto von Bismarck declares that he wants to achieve German unity under Prussian leadership. He tells the Prussian parliament that Prussia would unite Germany from above after the failed revolution from below in 1848. Germany does not look to Prussia's liberalism, but to its power. And majority decisions in the great questions of the time are decided through fire and blood. Second Schleswig War is ended in 1864. The Danish nationalists pushed King Christian III to deepen Danish control of Schleswig in violation of the peace deal. Bismarck could now hitch his aggressive intentions to the German Confederation's decision to march into the Danish duchies and Schleswig. Austro-Prussian forces defeated the Danish army, and the Treaty of Vienna awarded the duchies to Prussia and Austria. In 1864, Prussia offered Denmark, but they soon found that making a lasting peace harder than making the two powers agreed to administer the duchies separately in consultation.
Bismarck is outwardly unenthusiastic about the fragile arrangement, but privately he also sees an opportunity to finally determine whether Austria or Prussia will dominate a future German state. Territory doesn't go well. Austria wants to combine Schleswig-Holstein into one independent state, but Prussia would only agree if the new state's ruler will accept Prussian influence. Both sides now see war as inevitable. April 1866, Prussia makes a secret deal with Italy. Prussia goes to war against Austria before July 8th, and Italy would join on Prussia's side. Italian forces would help Prussia by tying up Austrian troops in the south, and Italy would receive the province of from Austria in the future peace treaty. To clear the path for war, Bismarck also hints to French Emperor Napoleon III that if France stays neutral, it might receive some territory west of the Rhine. Bismarck is maneuvering Prussia towards war, but some people in the German states oppose the idea. Liberal lawyer Rudolf von Ehring expresses his concerns in early June 1866. My sense of justice is on the side of Austria. Such shamelessness, such horrible frivolity, perhaps no war has ever been instigated as the one Bismarck is trying to raise against Austria at present. Everyone abhors the struggle here. Germans armed against Germans, a civil war, a plot of 3 or 4 powers, without any semblance of law, without the participation of the people, brought to peace. Russian Crown Princess Victoria will write to her mother, Queen Victoria, that she had opposed the war. You know, I consider the war a mistake caused by the uncontrolled power of unprincipled men, that I have no dislike for Austrians generally. Banished Ferdinand Cohen-Flynn is radically opposed to the war and attempts to assassinate Bismarck in vain. Chancellor survives, only minor wounds. But opposition to the war makes them different. In June, Prussia accuses Austria of breaching their treaty on Schleswig-Holstein. This time, Bismarck uses this manufactured crisis to provoke Austria into turning to the German Confederation's governing body for clarification, which Prussia then interprets as an actual breach of the treaty, since they're supposed to administer the duchies without outside influence. Prussian troops march into Holstein on June 10th, an open violation of federal law. Austria withdraws its units as it does not want a war, but then Bismarck proposes that the German Confederation exclude Austria. Finally, the Austrian Emperor reacts just as Bismarck had hoped. On June 14, 1866, the German Confederation declares war on Prussia for breaking Confederation law. The northern German states boldly joined Prussia, while the southern German states remained loyal to the Confederation. Austro-Prussian War for supremacy in a future Germany known in German as the German War and in Italian as the Third Italian War of Independence has begun. Over the next 6 weeks, the iron and blood will spread to 4 separate fronts over much of Central Europe. The Austro-Prussian War of 1866 sees heavy fighting in Habsburg Bohemia, along the Main River, in Hanover, and along the Austro. Take a look at the Austrians that went. Summer base. Officer Corps is professional, but the rank and file are trained conscripts. Many Prussian troops saw action in Denmark in 1864, but on the whole, their army is much less experienced than Austria's. Austria's troops are also conscripts, but its officers and veterans have seen fighting in 1848, 1859, and 1864. Despite this, the army is communication. Austria's northern army in Bohemia, commanded by Feldpointmeister Ludwig von Banished, the niece of Emperor Franz Joseph, perhaps because he understands technological inferiority of his own army. The government was in the process of modernizing the military, but progress was limited by budget cuts. Take a look at the difference in Austrian and Prussian infantry firearms. We asked Jonathan Ferguson from the Royal Armories to show us some guns from their collection.
Hi guys, I'm Jonathan Ferguson from Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armories Museum here in the UK. I'm very happy to be asked to show you a couple of the firearms on this particular conflict. First up, we have the Austrian Lorentz. Now this is on one hand pretty conventional stuff, but we have to think about the time frame here. This was introduced in 1854. The Model 1854 is the original incarnation. This example from our collection is actually the Model 1862. If I go into the minutiae of that, except to say that the lock is improved, a bit more like the Enfield. And the barrel is made of steel rather than iron. Now there's a sort of rabbit hole there about nitrocellulose propellant experiments that were going on in Austria that didn't really pan out. So, as far as I'm aware, the steel barrel is a bit of a red herring. This is the 1862 improved model, which would have been in at least some use by the time of this. Overall, it's a percussion rifle musket, by which we mean muzzle loaded. Well, it's long, first of all. Muskets tend to be long because they are handles for a bayonet. So in the case that it is loaded at the muzzle with a cartridge, but with a separate cap on nipple here. So you can really think of this very much as the Enfield 1853, Springfield 1861. It's that level of technology. So by 1866, it's far from old hat. It's still pretty much the cutting edge. It's just that it looks a little bit primitive in respect of its muzzle loading, not breech loading. So that's other type we're going to look at. Prussian needle rifle. Needle gun is commonly the translation of Gewehr. Apologies to our German speaking. Our German speaking good. But really it is a rifle, so in English we would always insist on calling it a rifle, not a gun. So needle rifle, or in British parlance, a needle prime rifle. Weird one. So radically different looking piece of kit, as you can see, and we're not too worried here about the furniture, the fact that it has brass barrel bands, or as opposed to steel, that kind of thing. It's really the action that is the important bit here, and this great big bolt handle sticking up. And that is a breech loading rifle. Specifically, the first of the, what we now call bolt action bolt rifles. But we haven't got the magazine, of course, but at this point, in 1841 is the initial model, Model 1841 Prussians, which is what this example from our collection is. Dated 1848 on the Knox form, as we call it in Britain. And that's actually the date of these were first issued. Allegedly, the Prussians were keeping these Bunderwaffen in reserve, and their first use was in the uprisings in 1848 and 1849 in Germany. So a little bit of a slow start. But why? Why is that so important? Well, the sheer rate of speed to get out. Coupled with the Prussian tactic of Schnellfeuer, rapid fire, at close formidable. And that's because, although it requires one more step than a modern bolt action, obviously load it, press down, and pull back. Angle. So you pull back on the cocking piece, at which point you can, now this one is very old and not in very good condition, so I'm going to have to assist it to the rear. There we go. Should be there. Great videos, by the way, you can watch from Banished and Captain Paul, Brett Gibbons, guys who've done some great stuff with stuff in working order. This is a museum piece. So pull it to the rear, and you can insert your cartridge. Now this is a fully prepared, self-contained cartridge. First time. Don't have to put the cap on the nipple. Cap it in the cartridge. And that's where the needle comes in. Because this primitive, I think I can legitimately call this primitive, form of bolt action requires needle to go shooting up the back of the paper cartridge, quite far into it to actually hit and ignite, cap inside, fire off the charge, let the bullet out the barrel. So you insert your cartridge, push it in, close it up. Classic bolt action that you don't have late box things. Don't just do shot at us. That leaves final step of pushing forward on the needle carrier to actually cock it. And if this had its carrier installed, doesn't sadly, we would have a little cocking piece effectively, or cocking piece within the needle carrier. Sorry, needle carrier within the cocking piece, protruding out the back, and when we pull the trigger, that will shoot forward, fire the round. So obviously this one is in slightly relic condition. It has been heavily cleaned well, but it looks very shiny. So that's because it's on point rusty. But it does at least give you a nice impression of what this might have looked like when it wasn't shipped brand new. It's also got a bit of a bent rammer, but we won't hold that against it. An important feature of these rifles would be sights. On the needle rifle, you have several options for a block, notch effectively. There, you have something like 300 Schritt, like 260 meters, something like that. Schritt being a step, another unit of measurement in that region at that time. You then have two other sight speeds which flip up. So that one flips up and gives you extended range, of course, with a notch on top of it, and then for up to 7, the maximum 700 Schritt, about 600 meters, you have a little notch right on the top of this very tall leaf here. So intermediate one, this window in the middle. So several different sight options, really quite nice, out to maybe 6 meters. In reality, this is firing a sub-caliber bullet, i.e. a bullet smaller than the actual bore. 13.2mm in diameter and a 16.5mm bore. Using a sabot cup to actually engage with the rifling grooves and split the bullet. The bullet itself is not fun. It's also a very long and not very aerodynamic bullet. It's sort of egg-shaped. And so the trajectory of this thing at 600 meters is a real arc. And, well, guys who have shot these in the present state test them out, you're not going to be able to hit the man-sized target at 8 or even 500 meters. The effective range of this thing is more like 300. So, very rapid fire, 7 rounds per minute out of this compared to 2 rounds per minute for a muzzle loading rifle previously, and 3 rounds per minute for a musket. Rifle accuracy would only amount out to 300 meters, something like a laser rifle. But run for the run. But very high penetrating 41, actually a little bit behind the curve in some ways, by war, when the second Pacific War happens, and this thing shows its capabilities, but it hasn't got the legs of what would become the real king of the battlefield, arguably, in the A-Rifle. Whereas the Lorenz, by 66, is using a mini-A pattern bullet, Oberwils bullet, basically a mini-A bullet, expanded at the base, so it physically fits the groove of the rifling, and this thing will take you out 500 feet. So, battles like Königgrätz come down really to tactics, experience, and numbers. The rifle absolutely helped. But had the Austrians made use of the maybe the story a bit different, rather than relying on good old-fashioned Jonathan and Royal Armories for providing us with this insight into their vast collection. Check out the YouTube channel, and for example, their recent video on the Enfield Eagle gun to learn more about historic firearms. The reputation of the Prussian Kaiser extends beyond the military. Austrian author Berta von Suttner later writes about the deadly effects of the new rifle in her anti-war novel, Die Banished. Like cattle for the slaughter, our troops must succumb to this murderous weapon. Wie das Schlachtvieh müssen unsere Truppen dieser mörderischen Waffe unterliegen. Austrian artillery, the most important weapon on the battlefield at this time, has also not been fully modernized. The bronze-barrel muzzle-loading Austrian M1863 field gun is superior in range and penetrating power, but the steel breech-loading Prussian 64-4 pounder guns can fire much faster at 10 rounds a minute.
All right. Please. The one you're pouring is so low. Gotta get home. So low.
Already a call. It was bad.